I'm Lawrence Luckenbill, and you are watching Trek Culture.
I'm not conscious when I'm checking the mail, which is good because some of it is annoying as hell. So it's like I go on automatic and just write very polite replies because if I were conscious, I would tell people what I really think. I'm a grumpy old man, you know.
I mean, listen, you created the Tribbles. You can be as grumpy as you like, mate. I mean, literally,
Yes.
so much just for that alone.
I'll share a story with you. I don't remember when it happened, probably mid-70s, somewhere around there. And I was talking with Beecho Trimble, and I might have said something about this or that or the other. And she said, "You do realize, don't you, you have made millions of people smile." I think this was about the time the Muppet movie came out. It's like, you know, Kermit the Frog is one of my heroes. He went to Hollywood to make millions of people smile. She said, "You have made millions of people laugh. There are not very many people on the planet who can say that." And now this was in the 70s. Now here we are 40, 50 years later. And the Trouble with Tribbles is still iconic. People still watch it, still talk about it, oh, this was the first Star Trek I ever saw. I showed it to my sister and she became a Star Trek fan. And I thought, this thing didn't age. It became this timeless thing. Now I know there are things about it I would change if I could. You know, if I had a time machine, I'd go back and say, but you know, I get to watch it regularly. We do the Star Trek set tour over at Ticonderoga. James Colley has done this amazing recreation of the original sets, only more so because everything works. You know, you press the button and whatever is supposed to happen happens. And so I've seen the episode on the average of once a month because I'm commenting on it for the audience. And it's like, this is very odd. This thing still works. The actors, the interaction, the dialogue, the camera angles, the directing, the props, particularly the props. I mean, I have quite a conversation about how we made the Tribbles work because remember, this was a weekly TV show with a very limited budget. And yet we brought this thing to life. And at the time, Gene Roddenberry, Star Trek is not a comedy. And yet, if you had to pick one episode or one part of Star Trek, this has become the most iconic. And I'm a little bit gobsmacked, a little bit amazed. It would be the Tribbles. And I think it's because not only are they cuddly little things like, you know, your dog, your cat, but there is also an ecological message there that really tells you a lot about we're not just disassociated saying here's something, you know, cute and cuddly. It's like, this is the effect it has because you're not being responsible. And I think that's it's a very hidden message. It's not immediately obvious, but if you look at the Tribbles, they're there, and it's there, and it has been referenced in hundreds. Well, I don't know hundreds, but a lot of different TV shows. There's L.A. Law, where Corbin Burnson asks Roxanne, says, "Do you have the episode with the Tribbles? They're going to go over to her house, and she's going to make hot chocolate and watch Star Trek. Do you have the one with her?" And I actually met Corbin Burnson and thanked him for. I fell out of my chair laughing because I was a big fan of L.A. Law. But there's been references on Night Court and the Simpsons, and one of the news shows did when they were reporting on the trash building up, they were doing the Trouble with Trash. And it's just become this part of American culture. And I'm a little bit, on the one hand, I'm very flattered, really. And on the other hand, I'm a little bit annoyed that I personally am not getting more attention.
Well, and that's what.
Well, I get to be on your show, so that does count. That does count. Okay.
But in fairness, I get it because this is you said it perfectly. It's, we're 60 years later and we're talking about the Trouble with Tribbles. We do a series on our show called The Ups and Downs, and we do the new episodes coming out and we do the retro ones. And one of the ones we did was The Trouble with Tribbles because it's such a well-known, beloved episode to this day. And it's so instantly recognizable to viewers I've been watching for a while now. I remember watching DS9 when they did Trials and Tribulations and going, I remember the episode they're talking about as well.
They did a great job with that one. They did a spectacularly good job. The director, Jonathan West, was a remarkable man. Mike and Denise Akuda, who were responsible for the art direction, did an incredible job in recreating the original Enterprise sets. And I was there for the shooting for a couple of days, and it was just an amazing experience to come back to the Tribbles. And if you look carefully, you can see a gray-haired crewman picking up Tribbles in one of the shots.
I remember seeing there's an article about the greatest crewman that ever was on the Enterprise features in that episode, I think. Oh, maybe I'm making up that headline. I don't know.
I don't know. But I want to point out that none of this could work without the incredible behind-the-scenes work of so many talented people, the director and the camera people and the special effects and the props and of course the actors. But you have to, without the good script, without the people working, but all you have is a bunch of naked people standing in a large, dark, empty room with nothing to say or do. So.
There's an audience for that for sure, but that's
I'm sure, but that's a whole other show, and I don't want to write that one. There wouldn't be a lot of dialogue written for that one.
Yeah, Star Trek After Dark. We'll call it that.
And this goes back to the original conception of the Tribbles, that Gene L. Kuhn was originally concerned that it sounded like a very expensive problem to do the Tribbles, and. So when I wrote the outline for the Tribbles, I said they are like balls of fluff that you see on keychains. They have no eyes. They have no. They're just little balls of fluff. Now, of course, once we handed that off to the prop department, they figured out how to make the Tribbles react to the Klingons and how to make the Tribbles on the railing walk and all that stuff. But the Tribbles were always meant to be as simple an idea or as simple a thing that you could film as possible, because the minute you have to put googly eyes on them or anything else, what happens is, Hua Chang, who was in charge of special effects and props for the show, he was hired on a per need basis, hired a lady named Jacqueline something, and I always forget her last name, and she had a couple weeks to sew up 500 Tribbles. Now imagine how much work that would have been if she had to put eyes on them. So no, it's the whole idea was you have one on your desk there. The whole idea is to have this thing that people look at it, oh, what is it? Like Michelle says in the show, oh, what is it? Can I pet it? So, by the way, I love Nichelle. She was one of the most remarkable and fun people ever knew. She came to my 70th birthday party, and she came to anything I invited her to, and because she knew how much I loved her. And so she parked herself in the corner, and one by one, everybody at the party, and it was a big event, went up to pay homage to the Queen of Star Trek. And so it was more her party than mine, which I didn't object to. It was like, look who came to my party, and everybody was having a great time. And it was a really nice party. I invited, some of my people were famous friends, and some of them were just friends, and some of them were longtime acquaintances. So having them all in one room, it was great. Some, including some friends from high school, I still stayed in touch with. So. And that's the only thing I miss out of moving out of LA, is that there are people I don't get to see as often anymore.
I could well, because I'm just thinking, what a fun crossover of just different parts of your life all together in the same room. And also, I'm just thinking, anyone, if there was anyone ever who could take a spotlight at a party, I mean, it's Nichelle Nichols.
Yes. Because Harlan Ellison was also there. Harlan Ellison and Emo Phillips and Chase Masterson and I forget who all. It wasn't, the A-list, but it was the almost A-list. I have met a lot of people who they want to write. And I say, I can't tell you 60 years of lessons in learning how to write. I can't pour that into your head. All I can do is tell you You have to write and you have to read. You have to write and you have to read. You have to do research. You have to get out there. You have to meet people, lots of people. You have to meet people you don't like. You have to live a big life. And then you have source material to write about. And then you have to be honest about it. And then you have to write from the depths of your soul. And believe me, there are things I'm still trying to dredge up from the depths of my soul that I still have trouble writing. So, but at least I know they're there. I know what I have to do. But, I had a situation earlier this week where this, I don't know how old he is. I figured he was in his 20s. And I finally said, look, I'm not a ladder. You can't climb me to success. You have to do it yourself.
Right.
And he did not understand that there's a whole professional, the rules or agreements or the way people work with each other. You have to recognize that you have to represent a contribution. And if we talk about the trouble with Tribbles, it was like in those days, everything was freelance. So you could come in with a story idea, and the story idea had to be interesting enough that they would want to pursue it. So Dorothy Fontana wrote a memo that said this fuzzy story might work. Let's buy the outline and buy the story idea and give it to a real writer. Gino Kuhn said, no, I've met this kid. Let's give him a chance. Let's see what he can do. And I was very lucky that she picked it. They were starting to get a lot of stuff being submitted. I was very lucky she picked that out. And I was very lucky that Gino Kuhn gave me the chance to prove myself one step at a time. And I proved I could write a script. I had already proven it at USC Film School, but the thing is that you have to learn the professional way of doing things if you want to succeed professionally. And the same thing, I then turned my attention to how do I sell a story, science fiction story, to a magazine? How do I sell a novel? How do I sell a story to an anthology? Harry Harrison bought my first story for an anthology. And Annie McCaffrey introduced me to some editors in New York. And one of them was impressed enough with me that she bought 3 books, one anthology and 2 novels, something like that. And Betty Ballantyne bought a whole bunch of books from me. And all of a sudden I had 6 books in print in the first year. And all of a sudden, some of it was actually like 2.5 years worth of production, but they all came out at the same time. And so all of a sudden I was considered a major science fiction writer, to be, considered Bob Silverberg and Harry Harrison and the new generation. And I was like, of course it went to my head. I was very.
How could it not? Do you know what I mean?
But also it's because I had been the weird kid, and I didn't fit in anywhere. Even some of my teachers in school didn't want to deal with me. They didn't think I had any ability, and suddenly here I was, a Hugo nominee several times over, and with several very good reviews on my books, and Tom Easton, who was reviewing for Analog, said, I think we're fortunate enough to have a new major writer on the scene. And I said, whoa, which was very good for my ego, because I finally had acknowledgement that I was good at something. I was no longer the weird kid who didn't fit in. If we don't entertain you, you're going to throw the book across the room. You're going to turn off the TV. You're going to change the channel. But the entertainment is about the communication. This is how the universe works, or this is how you could be a better person, or this is something that you might want to know, or this is something you don't want to know. So great storytelling sticks with you. This is why we remember 1984 or Jaws or most of Shakespeare. I mean, I don't know how widespread it is, but most of us know the soliloquy, to be or not to be. Or at least we know the first 6 lines of it. So, and Shakespeare when was he working? 1600 something? And for his work to endure for 400 years, like, that's a pretty good success for a writer. Maybe Aeschylus and Aristophanes could say, hey, look at the new kid on the block.
What is it? Wasn't they were saying it was Aristotle as well who said there are 6 basic plots?
Yeah, it was Aristotle, and we studied that there is a book called the Poetics of Aristotle, which lists the 6 not the 6 basic plots, but the 6 elements, which are spectacle and music and plot and character and conflict, whatever. I don't remember them off the top of my head, because there's a point at which, as a student, you was have I addressed this, right? But when you reach, but there's a point where you have so internalized what storytelling is that you start making up your own definitions. So I would, when I would teach my writing courses, I would talk about beginning, middle, end is a structure toward transformation. That the character experiences a shift. So, for instance, in Jaws, Roy Scheider's character is no longer afraid of the water, no longer afraid of the ocean. At the end, he blows up the shark. It's like, all right, I handled this. But one of my colleagues pointed out that there are stories that are not about a transformation. They're simply about what is incomplete, and that's what the story is, about the hero completing them. Well, Sherlock Holmes has to solve a murder mystery, and Sherlock never grows or changes except once in a while he runs into Irene Adler or Moriarty. But basically, the average Sherlock Holmes story is Sherlock Holmes. I did write a Sherlock Holmes story where Holmes gets murdered and Watson has to solve the crime, and Watson is not stupid. And but there's also a transformation about it. It's like, I get to the end and I want that person to have some insight or realization. So it's very hard for me to write a story where there is not some kind of realization.
Well, even, I mean, like, not even to segue, but that's exactly Ben. Like, basically just describes that perfectly, you know. By the time you get to the end of the episode, you know, Ben Meseraude had these ideas about Kirk and Spock, and, you know, then over the course of it, grows into Spock.
Kirk and Spock, yeah. The average Star Trek episode is they have an adventure and they get back in the Enterprise and go off to the next adventure. There are several episodes where the adventure is so critical to the development of Kirk's character that it does have an effect on. And Harlan Ellison's episode, City on the Edge of Forever, and I think Harlan was I loved Harlan. He was like my big brother. But I think he never recognized that Star Trek you had to fit your, Star Trek was like a specific mold, and you had to fit your story into that mold. Star Trek wasn't going to break the mold because you had a great story. And Dorothy Fontana had to make City on the Edge of Forever. Harlan blamed Gene, but it was really Dorothy. Yeah, and she finally told him about, I think it's what killed him. She finally told him. So, but City on the Edge of Forever, even in its watered down, as Harlan put it, version, won all kinds of awards, and it was a brilliant episode. And Kirk was never the same after that episode. And neither was television, because at the end of it, Kirk says, "Let's get the hell out of here," which was a breakthrough in television language. So my episode was also a breakthrough because it was the first use of the word pregnant. Tribbles are born pregnant. So, but... which I thought was a very funny gag at the time. Yeah. So anyway, but there are episodes of Star Trek that change the relationship of the characters dramatically, and that if you were aware of them, if you were a good writer and paying attention to the other episodes, if you were aware of that relationship, it's like once you knew Kirk had the great love of his life, Edith Keeler, you were very careful not to address that in a way that would diminish that. And somebody did a breakdown, and they said Kirk didn't sleep around as much as everybody thinks. Sometimes he did it to save his ship or his crew, or sometimes there was a this or a that or the other. And it was an interesting breakdown that with Star Trek, we were trying to. Gene Roddenberry used to say, "If I wouldn't believe it on the bridge of the battleship Missouri, I wouldn't believe it on the bridge of the Starship Enterprise," which is a great instruction, which was forgotten in the third season and forgotten a lot in Next Generation. I argued against putting Wesley on the bridge, but by that time, there were too many people who didn't understand the essential premise of Star Trek working on the show, so I left. It wasn't worth trying to stay, which is a shame because Star Trek Next Generation could have been a much better show. They did do some great episodes. Melinda Snodgrass wrote a great one, Measure of a Man.
We actually, we spoke to Melinda only a couple of weeks ago. She is lovely. She is
I love her so much. She is so intelligent and she understands writing better than most people. And she is, because she has such a varied and interesting background, she's able to bring that to the story she writes. And I'm jealous of that.
Thank you so much for watching this abbreviated version of this podcast. Now, if you go to our audio platforms, you will get the full version of this podcast with this guest. So we really, really appreciate you subscribing to that, and you're just awesome and wonderful. Thank you so much.